we are going to address the elephant in the room. That's killer.
Let's go to Matsuri!
Some of you might already know what this car is. A lot of you probably do. It has been around on the channel for a while. It is somewhat of a mythical creature, right? So there's definitely been videos on this car. This car's definitely been to events. Usually this car leaves events early. Sometimes it leaves events running, sometimes it leaves events not running. This is Damo's 408 Iron Block LS based S13. It's got a Magnuson 2650 Supercharger. It's got a 4-speed G-Force Dogbox, and in the back it's got a Winters quick change rear end. So it is a very well set up car. It's also got Wisefab in the front. So it's pretty much got all of the bits that you would need to make a really, really good drift car. And when this thing is running and driving and doing drift things, it is sick. It billows smoke, it's loud, it's fast, it makes all the V8 Supercharged noise that everybody loves. And much to our disgust, we have tried to convince Damo to put turbos on it. He won't do it, so we've got to stick with the Supercharger. We are updating the ECU engine control package in this thing. So it had a 2500 with an IQ3, an IO expander, nothing wrong with it. It works, it's perfectly fine. We just want to have that little bit of extra control over things. So pretty much our whole reasoning behind upgrading the ECU is we want to get rid of as many relays as we can. So we are going to put a Rebel LS ECU in there. It's pretty much the latest ECU from Haltech. It's essentially a dedicated LS PDM ECU. So anything LS swapped, these ECUs are going to be really good for them. And this is going to be the first one that we're actually going to use. So it'll be a bit of a test to see how far you can go with them, because obviously this is a pretty extreme LS swap. It's not really just a stock engine into a car and make it run. So for us, it'll be a good test to see what we can actually do with them. We're going to use the Rebel and we're going to pair that with a PD16 to give us basically a few more 25 amp outputs and a few more 8 amp outputs to where we can run everything important on this car straight from the ECU, and then we can set up safeties surrounding all of those things. The electric water pump is a really important one. If it turns off, it's not a mechanical thing anymore. It doesn't have a belt driving it. So if that electric water pump turns off, the first thing we're going to know about it is when the engine's overheated. While we're upgrading everything, we're also going to pull the engine out and just double check everything over that. Make sure that it's 100% healthy, ready to go, so that when everything else on this chassis has been touched, we know that the engine is healthy, we know the gearbox is healthy. Put it back on the dyno with the fresh ECU. We're not going to be chasing power numbers this time. We're actually going to be putting a smaller pulley system on it. So we're going to be dropping back to around 13 PSI, which should get us around 850. Basically, first things first, I've got the wiring out, it's in the box already. Get the engine out, get everything else stripped out of the engine bay, get the engine apart, get it health checked, and then put it all back together. Hopefully the ECU should be here tomorrow or the day after, and then we can get cracking on that. Step 1, drain the coolant. Step 2 is get impatient with it draining with the cap on, take the cap off and spill it all over the ground. Check back in when I've completed step 2. All right, stage 2 is complete. It's on the floor.
Fucking messy here.
I thought I'd gotten away with it, and then it just went, I took this off and it just went straight over the fucking top. But anyway, Dane will mop that up for me, so it's all right. We've got the majority of the engine bay of this thing stripped out, and I've got the lift plate on. All the wiring's off, obviously the engine harness is already out, but just the alternator and stuff like that. Pretty much I'm going to go up, drop the exhaust off, and I'll drop the gearbox off while I'm there, and then we're going to come back down and I'm going to play one of my favorite games, which is get the headers out of this car, because that side is a split header. This header sort of slips out. It's on a slip joint back there. But it very, 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 very rarely actually slips out. tail shaft's out, I'm draining the gearbox oil at the moment, and then we just have to take the shifter off and we'll drop the box out. Then we'll take the headers, and then a couple dry sump lines and the engine will come out. It's also just started raining again. You can't even tell because it's sunny out there, but it's rained like 4 times today, which is weird. And then it's sunny, and then it rains, and then it's sunny, and then it rains. But let this finish draining, put the bung back in it, and then get this box out. My phone's ringing.
Oh, that's awkward timing.
If it's Stuart, we're going to ignore it.
Or we could answer it.
Stuart, should I answer it or ignore it?
Yeah, let's answer it.
Stuart.
Danny.
What do you want, Stuart?
What are you doing?
Nothing. What are you doing? What do you want?
I don't even know me.
I'm halfway through pulling the gearbox out.
Oh, fuck me.
What do you want?
I don't even fucking know that. What did they?
Oh, I don't know.
What did I need?
Copy.
Good chat.
Well,
Alright, it's back to what we were doing.
yeah, what are we doing here, Sam? I can't see because
I made a contraption.
there's nowhere to be.
That's right.
Oh,
What
wow.
you don't know is that I got a big long rod. Alright, so we got the engine in the engine room, and we are going to address the elephant in the room, which is the color of this oil / consistency. If this was just a petrol engine, as if this was just an engine that ran on 98, that would probably be a very concerning thing to see when opening up your engine. Because this thing is on E85, it's really not an issue at all. So this thing's pretty much been idled in and out of the shed for like, I don't know, a month or 2 at least. And pretty much what happens to oil running on E85 is it absorbs moisture out of the fuel and essentially turns it into this. So it basically does the same thing that a petrol car would do if it blew a head gasket. It absorbs water, mixes water with oil essentially. This basically just does that as a byproduct of running. It's just what happens. That's why it's so important to get E85 cars up to temperature regularly. If you're doing any sort of like idling in and out of the shed, or you don't really get it up to temperature, or you only go for short drives, stuff like that, it's very important to actually get your engine up to operating temperature and to burn all of that moisture out of the oil. Obviously we haven't done that here because we've pretty much just been waiting to actually pull this thing down. So if this is your engine at home and in your car and you're running E85, it's very important for the longevity and health of your engine to get it up to operating temperature fairly regularly, because otherwise your oil ends up looking like that. It's also more important to do oil changes more often than you would on a petrol car. So that's why it looks like that. So we're gonna get the rest of this thing pulled apart. Pretty much the plan at the moment is we're gonna pull the heads off. It's gonna what's that fucking Black Eyed Peas songs? We're going to pull the heads off. It's going to get new head gaskets. We're going to see sort of if the heads need to be machined or not, and then we'll flip it over. We're going to pull a couple rod bearings off, check the health of them. If they're looking good, we'll put it back together. If it looks like the rod bearings are in need of some attention, then this thing will get pulled further down. But for now, we're going to get the heads off, and then see what we find inside. All right, so first things first, we get the rocker gear out. The way I like to do it is basically I keep everything in the orientation that comes off. So you can see here I've written PF and DF. That stands for passenger front and driver's front. Very creative, I know, but basically this is the passenger side of the engine. I'm gonna pull the rocker gear off, boom, lay it down there in its orientation. Then I won't get confused. It eliminates any possibility for error. So even if you know exactly where they go and which way, it just eliminates another possibility for an error. So it's especially useful if you do stuff at home. And you're not like familiar with doing it every day. It's just a helpful little thing, especially if you pull things apart, you don't get to work on them every day. You start to forget where things go and stuff like that. So it's just easier if you just lay it out how it comes off. So we'll get the passenger side head completely off first, and then we'll take the driver's side off. It's also much easier with this because it's a, they're on a shaft. Every rocker's on a shaft, so like LS ones, probably also LS2s. I'm not 100% sure where they switch, but these rockers, because they're a performance rocker, they're on a shaft, so they're all on one shaft, which means they all come off together. So it makes it nice and easy from that point of view. Similarly to if you're pulling camshafts out, you just want to work them off bit by bit. You don't want to just back the end bolts off all the way, because you'll end up bending things, which you don't want to do, because these are very nice expensive parts that you don't want to break. You'll sort of feel as you pull them off the bolts that have tension. So obviously this one's still got a fair bit of tension on it. The rest are fairly loose, so you know that this one's basically holding the weight. So you want to just make sure that you don't end up with one bolt holding all of the tension, especially if this was just, if these were individual rockers, wouldn't be so much of an issue, because you can just wind the individual rocker all the way out, doesn't matter. And when they're on a shaft like this, you got to make sure you pull them out nice and evenly. All right, so we're all loose there. Still a tiny bit of tension on that one, but the rest are all nice and loose. So we should be right to just pull them the majority of the way out now. All right, now we pull all our little bolts out and we take them over here and we lay them down exactly as they came out. So now I know for a fact that that is the front, this is the rear, that's the passenger side, simples. Same again, we'll pull off our little rocker cradle that doesn't want to come off for some reason. So there are shims. Shims that go underneath this little carrier. So yeah, you got one there, a couple are stuck in the head. So it's just, we'll just make sure that we get those shims out. So I might just shove a rag under there and go get a little pick, and I'll pop all those shims off. Not really shims, they're more of a sealing washer, I guess, but we'll go get them all off and put them somewhere nice and safe so that we don't lose them. Pull these push rods out first. So same thing, it's definitely an old engine builder's trick. How true it is, I don't know. I've never bothered to mess with it to find out, but basically what you want to do is you want to keep your push rod in the same cylinder that it came out of, and you want to try as best as you can to keep the orientation the same. So basically this end came out of the bottom, that's riding on our lifter. This end is pushing on our rocker arm, so we want to keep it exactly the same way. So obviously the way that I can remember that from these ones is, you can see here we got 7.6. When it comes out, the riding is sort of right way up, if that makes sense. So I know that all of these should be the same. I'll double check as I pull them out, but basically I know that this is cylinder 1, number 1 push rod, and it goes in that way. So again, I'm still going to keep them in the same order. I'm still going to lay them all out perfectly, but just it'll just help me remember when I go to put it back together. So that was the same. It'll just help me remember when I go to put it back together that they that's the orientation in which they came out. The other way you can do this, if you don't have a lovely big stainless steel bench like I do, get yourself like a little cardboard box and you can ride on it, and you can just stab your push rods in the order, and it'll obviously take up a lot less space than what I'm taking up here, but I've got the space, so I'm going to use it. There we go. All right, there you go. One. Can't even really tell, they're very small. So I need to make sure that I have 8 of them. And if we have 8 of them, very good, very nice. If we have less than 8 of them, not very good, very nice. 5, 6, and then if we flip this one over, should be 2 more, which there is one there. 7 and 8. Lovely. All right, great success. Very good, very nice. LS heads have 2 different size head bolts. So basically they got these 2 rows here, which are the same size. They're like a 10 or 11 mil stud, roughly. And then they also have these top row up here, which are a much smaller stud. So it's very important to basically make sure that these little studs don't carry the tension as you crack them. So if you were to crack all these big ones, all of the tension is then basically going to be put on these. So what I like to do first is crack this top row of little studs, just crack them first, so that they're not holding any tension, and then you can crack the bigger ones in a nice little sequence. But I like to crack these top ones first to make sure that they're not under any like extra stress, basically. I think it's more important, or in my eyes, it's more important if this was going into an alloy block. This is an iron block, so I'm not too concerned about the strength of the threads in this block, but alloy blocks, you don't really want to be putting any extra load on those threads if you can avoid it. So I just like to crack these little ones first. Same with anything. I like to crack the little bolts first. Even on so on RB head, they've got 3 little 10mm bolts, or 3 little M6 bolts, sorry, as well as the head bolts. And I always like to crack those little M6 bolts first, just to make sure you don't put any extra tension on that. Because you can imagine if you've got all these big bolts pulling this head down, and then you go and crack all the big bolts off, but all these ones are still tight, you can imagine that that would have extra tension on it, and that's just what I try to avoid. So we crack these little ones first, so they're all loosened off, and then we can go back through and do the bigger ones in just like a bit of a sequence. Try a bigger bar. Am I going to go get a bigger bar? No. No, I am not. Alright, BRB. I just say BRB in real life, that's disgusting. Oh, first try. Coolant temp. Fun fact about LS's is their heads are symmetrical, so you could put that head on this side, this head on that side, nothing would change. Still, I like to keep them same, don't get me wrong. But you could, in theory, pull one head off. Where am I? I don't even know where I want to put this. Probably there, I guess, eh? You could, in theory, pull that head off, put it on that side, pull that head off, put it on this side. And they would be identical. Am I going to do that? Absolutely not. Could you do it? Yes. Looks like we've had a bit of water sitting in under the blower, which is not really surprising considering there's a big hole in the bonnet. The other thing that's probably worth noting is this rusty trail mark down here. I don't know if you can see that. I have a feeling we're going to find some suspicious activity on that cylinder in the head gasket. There's actually more LS's in here than there is RB's at the moment, I've just realised. 1, 2, there's 3 LS's and 1.5 RB's. That's not a good ratio. Things have escalated, and we got the whole engine apart. I think the last thing I said to you that I was going to have a bit of a closer look and then get back to you. Had a bit of a closer look, now we get back to you. Nothing inherently terribly wrong, but a few things raising concern. First and foremost, number 8 bore doesn't feel the greatest. There's basically some surface corrosion, or essentially surface rust is basically what it is, on number 8, in number 8 cylinder on the bore. So that basically, the piston needs to come out of that, the bore needs to be honed, refinished, and the piston can go back in. That would be the quickest and easiest fix. Obviously, it's not the best fix, which you probably already presumed. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to strip the rest of the bottom end, which I've pretty much done. The only thing I got to get off is the balancer, which 2 rattle guns down so far, and I can't crack the bolt loose. But we have more rattle guns, so it's all right. But strip the rest of this bottom end. I'm going to pack up the heads and all of the componentry for that. I've just started to mark it all out and clean it up so it's not all oily, and we're going to send it off to Paul, get him to pull it completely down, strip it, and just go through it, check all the rings, check all the, re-hone the bores, resurface the block, resurface the heads, check the rings out if it needs new rings. They should be okay, but if it needs a set of rings, it's not the end of the world. That's kind of the least of our problems. So we're just going to refresh the entire thing so that once it goes back into the chassis, because the chassis is also essentially getting a refresh. So if we've got a nice refresh chassis with a new ECU and some nice wiring and a couple updated things in there, it doesn't make sense to kind of put a half-cocked engine back in it. So we're going to get this thing refreshed so it's sort of starting at ground zero. The chassis will be starting at ground zero, everything will be fresh, and it'll be good to go for Damo to go and thrash. We thought that we might have had a blown head gasket, but none of it, so these are Athena head gasket. They're very similar to a fire ring, but they're not quite a fire ring. But basically they've got these little cut rings that cut into the head. None of them had shifted. They all look like they'd sealed really well, so we're a little bit confused because we did think we had some sort of signs of a bad head gasket, but all that means is that we'll just have to look into a few other things just to triple check that everything's fine. The electric water pump is the main one that we'll have a look at, make sure that it's operating properly. But other than that, everything else looks good. Nothing's chewing itself to pieces in here. It's just that one bore looks like it's got a bit of rust. Either potentially that has come from a leaking head gasket, which we can't really see. Maybe it was only leaking once it's under boost, stuff like that. And that cylinder had a bit of water in it. It's caused surface rust, blah, blah, blah. Or the other option is that that cylinder, for whatever reason, was more prone to getting condensation in it as it's been parked up. But that's the less likely of the two scenarios. Engine's back in, it's back, it's all together, it's in the car. We fast forward that a little bit because we're in a little bit of a time crunch. So it's had a full refresh from Paul at MRE, Mad Racing Engines. He also does pretty much all of our other engines. He's got G-Ups billet block. It just went 1560 horsepower. If you haven't seen that video yet, go watch it. But onto the exciting stuff for me. I've got a bunch of Haltech goodies here ready to go into this car. So we've got a LSU wideband kit. We've got a 2x4 keypad, the CAN keypad, and then inside this big beautiful box here we have a Rebel LS ECU and plug-in harness. Yeah, so this is actually the first time I will be installing a Rebel LS. Done plenty of R5s and R3s and all that sort of stuff, but this is the first time I'll be doing sort of Haltech's like, here is everything you need, plug it in and it'll work option, if that makes sense. To make it a little bit more exciting though, because we do have a fair bit of extra stuff in this car, we are also adding a PD16 to the system. So we'll have our Rebel LS controlling the ECU, that's the easy part. We'll lay it over, plug it in, and basically it's ready to go. And then the PD16, we're adding that in so that we have some extra PDM capabilities to control our electric water pump, fuel pumps, fans, all that sort of stuff. We got 3 fuel pumps in this thing, a couple fans, all that sort of stuff. So basically we're going to transform the engine side of this car, the electrics to do with the engine, is going to be entirely controlled by the Haltech with 0 relays. So first things first, basically want to get both of these ECUs mounted in the car. This used to run an Elite 2500 and all the expanders under the sun. It had an I/O box and wideband controllers and all that sort of shit under the dash. So there's plenty of room to put it up under there where the old stuff was. So we're basically just going to get this out and get it up under the dash, and we will sort of see what we're working with. But I'd say we'll have no issues. I can't even open the box. We'll have no issues. First step's open the box, yeah. Performance enhancing technology. Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, tough. Cool. Doesn't have the Shorelock or Surlock connectors like the Nexus series do. They're different connectors, but that's not a bad thing. It's arguably better because you can just put terminals on them, and terminals are easier to get than those other ones. Cool. All right. Yeah, first things first, I'm going to get both of these mounted up under the dash in some form of configuration that's nice. And then once I've got them both up under the dash in something that I like, I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet. There's honestly probably enough room to just put them like that. And then I can just join the power. Yeah, that'd be nice. Then we'll get the harness out and we'll lay the harness over the engine. And then we'll just keep going from there until I have nothing left to put on the car. And then we'll start it. I think we pretty much just put this whole dog
Shit, I thought we were going in and then
Yeah,
we came backwards. You scared me.
I'm going to put these long ones through first. And then, once we start getting that through, there is still so much length. You want to go on the other side of there and pull those?
Now you want me to do your job.
If you've got some extra length in your cables, don't be afraid to just wrap them around the nearest thing that you can find, just to take up that extra space.
Cable management.
Cable management. That's killer. Mad engines, nailed it. Paulie, fucking oath, makes my job easy. That's tough. Let's start again, eh? Tuning today, we're sort of just aiming for that like 12 to 14 pounds of boost range with the blower. We do have a pulley set up that should roughly rev the blower to about 20,000 RPM. I think they say they should go to like 24, 25,000 RPM, these blowers. So it should be, put it in the comments to guess. I think it should be 14 pound of boost at 840 horsepower, I reckon it's gonna be. We used to run the bigger, we're not used to, we do have the bigger pulley set up to run 20 pound of boost, but for Matsuri, we're going to run the smaller pulley combo we've got. So we're just sort of chasing, we're just sort of chasing a full day. Damon needs a full day of drifting. So this car, we've had two last events. The two last events we had with this car had a couple of little issues, but yeah, like I said, we rectified that with the engine. It was probably engine related items more so. A little different to what we're usually used to. It should be an RB, Damon, if you're listening, it's going to billet block RB next year. But other than that, it should be pretty much the same as what we do. Still same, I guess, like 14 pound of boost, 408 cube. It's a big engine with probably 11.5-ish AFR. And yeah, if we can make 840, 858, like anything that starts with an 8 will be a weapon. We've got an aggressive alignment set up in this that Juddy's done. It's got Wisefab front, all the underneath's been refreshed. Gearbox is serviced, diff serviced. Thing's a weapon, so it's got a 4-speed Dogbox in it. You pretty much put it in fourth gear and just put your foot down, the throttle down, so it's just a weapon. Do steady state first, try and look at our fuel map, see where it's at, see where it gets to, see where it's going to, like all that thing, making sure the fuel's coming down with the boost, etc., etc. But biggest difference of this, it's the Supercharger is on, like there's no lag, like so as soon as you put your foot down, you've got basically all the boost it can make. That's happy. That sounds good too. That sounds way more aggressive.
Everybody, say hi. Let's go to Matsuri.
Let's go. I think he's done 16 sets of tyres.
He's loving it.
Intake temperatures are through the roof. But the blower, damaged blower, actually good. Can't complain.